I had just stepped onto American soil after years of serving overseas in the Marines, ready to finally hug my family and taste my mother's cooking again. But instead of a warm welcome, I was met with hostility from Karen, the self-righteous HOA president who saw my homecoming as a disruption to her perfect neighborhood. She didn't just complain, she called the police on me, spread lies about my past, and even staged a dramatic fake assault in public to paint me as a threat. But what she didn't realize was that her obsession with control would spiral out of her hands, leading to her own downfall. That one phone call she made? It backfired so spectacularly that she ended up in handcuffs, while I walked away with my family, my dignity, and a newfound determination to stand my ground. But let's start from the beginning. But just before I start, I'd kindly ask you to hit that subscribe button, give this video your like, and comment below with the city you're watching from. Your support helps us share these powerful stories far and wide. Now buckle up. This is a battle you won't believe. But this is what actually happened. My name is James Carter, and I'm a 60-year-old Marine veteran. After 6 years of deployment, I finally landed at the airport near my hometown. I stepped off the plane with a duffel bag slung over my shoulder and an ache in my heart that no one could see. That ache came from years of missing birthdays, holidays, and small family moments. The crisp fall air filled my lungs as I walked outside. My sister Beth had planned a reunion at the local park, a place we grew up exploring on bikes and scavenger hunts. She wanted me to show up as a surprise. I could have called them from the airport, but the thought of seeing their faces in person, unannounced, was too sweet to pass up. As I rode in a cab, memories played in my head. The smoky smell of campfires in that park, the sound of crickets at night, and the endless chatter of my cousins during summer gatherings. The driver dropped me off near a row of oak trees. I could see bright balloons tied to picnic tables, and a big banner reading, "Welcome home, James," fluttering in the breeze. For a moment I just stood there, my feet almost rooted in place. I had imagined this homecoming 1,000 times, but nothing prepared me for the swell of emotion. I spotted my elderly mom fiddling with plates, my dad fussing with the grill, and Beth stepping away to greet another neighbor. This was it. My heart hammered as I finally took a step forward. I barely made it a few yards into the park when a sharp, clipped voice stopped me cold. "Excuse me, you can't just wander around here. Who are you?" I turned to see a woman about my age, but with a frosty glare and designer clothes that practically screamed HOA royalty. The name on her badge read Karen. She was standing near a flower bed, arms crossed, as though she owned the entire park. I blinked. "I'm James Carter. I'm here for a family reunion." She frowned, her eyes flicking to my Marine-issued bag and the slight scuff on my boots. "A reunion? I don't recall approving any gathering. I'm the HOA president, and nobody told me about any event." Her tone carried an air of entitlement that put me on edge. I forced a polite smile. "This is a public park. My sister set up a small party for me, but it's not—" She cut me off. "Small party or not, we have standards here. Did you file the correct paperwork with the HOA, pay the deposit for park usage, follow the noise ordinance guidelines?" I was stunned. "Ma'am, I literally just got off a plane. This is my homecoming with family." Karen narrowed her eyes. "So you're new to the neighborhood?" My temper flared a bit, but I kept it in check. "I've lived in this town all my life, but I've been away serving in the Marines." She raised an eyebrow. "Marines? That doesn't mean you get special treatment." Before I could argue, I heard my sister Beth shout my name. She came running, tears streaming down her face. When she saw Karen blocking my path, Beth slowed, confusion etched on her features. Karen sniffed. "If you think you can just show up with no permit and take over our park, you have another thing coming." Beth's hands balled into fists. "Karen, we talked about this. I sent an email to the HOA letting them know about James's welcome party. There was no response, so we assumed it was fine. It's just a family gathering." Karen glared at her. "I never saw that email, and even if you did send one, it doesn't mean you can do as you please." Despite Karen's icy attitude, I sidestepped her and walked toward my parents. The moment my mother saw me, she gasped and covered her mouth. My father's eyes lit up with joy. They rushed forward, enveloping me in the warmest hug I'd felt in years. For a few precious seconds, I forgot all about Karen and the tension. I was home, truly home. But the moment of bliss was short-lived. Karen, refusing to be ignored, stalked behind us. "This entire setup is unauthorized," she declared, pointing at the banner and the decorations. "If you people don't wrap this up immediately, I'll be forced to call the police." Beth whirled on her, anger flashing. "Call the police? Are you serious? He's a Marine who just came home. We're not disturbing anyone." Karen gave a dramatic sigh, whipped out her phone, and tapped at the screen. "Yes, I'm serious. Let's see how the authorities feel about unregistered gatherings in my neighborhood park." A hush fell over the group as we realized she was actually dialing 911. My jaw tensed. I've served my country for years, and now I'm being treated like a criminal in my own hometown? Sure enough, within minutes, the wail of sirens cut through the autumn air. 2 squad cars pulled up, lights flashing. A pair of officers emerged. One tall and broad-shouldered, with streaks of gray in his hair, the other younger and slender, scanning the scene with obvious curiosity. Karen marched up to them, launching into a speech so loud we could all hear it. "Officer, thank you for coming. There's an unauthorized gathering here. No permits, excessive noise, and potential rowdiness. I feel threatened." My father tried to speak, but the older officer held up a hand. He turned to me, noticing my duffel bag and the Marine patches. "Sir, can you explain what's happening?" I took a steady breath. "Officer, I just returned from overseas. This is my family throwing me a homecoming party. We're not causing trouble, just hugging, sharing food, and talking. The park is public, and we're not violating any laws." Karen scoffed, crossing her arms. "He's lying. They're trespassing on this private HOA space, and they refuse to comply when I ask them to leave." Beth raised her voice. "It's not private. This is a public park that the HOA sometimes helps maintain, but the city owns it." The younger officer pulled out a small notepad, scribbling details. The older officer studied Karen for a moment, then turned to me again. "Sir, have you threatened or harassed anyone?" I shook my head. "No, sir. We're just celebrating my return." Karen planted her hands on her hips. "He's intimidating. Look at him. He's in combat boots. That's enough to scare anyone." A wave of disbelief washed over me. Was she implying a Marine's uniform was threatening? I swallowed my anger. The older officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, wearing boots is not illegal. Do you have any evidence of a crime here?" Karen hesitated, flustered. "Well, they're definitely making too much noise." He glanced around at the small crowd. My mom, dad, a few cousins, and some neighbors who came to say hello. Most were just chatting quietly. We weren't even playing music. The younger officer sighed and looked at Karen. "Ma'am, unless you can point to a specific law they're breaking, we can't order them to leave a public park." Karen's face turned red. She sputtered for a second. "This is a respectable community. We have rules. We can't let just anyone gather whenever they want." The older officer cleared his throat. "These folks seem calm and within their rights. I'm afraid there's nothing we can do here." Karen stormed off, phone still in hand, muttering about taking it to the HOA board. The officers left without issuing a single citation, but the damage was done. My mother's face remained etched with worry, and my father kept shaking his head in disbelief. "I can't believe this," my mom whispered. "You come home, and right away someone tries to run you out of the park." I forced a smile, trying to ease her tension. "We handled worse things in the Marines, Mom. Don't let her ruin this day." Everyone attempted to get back into the party spirit, passing around paper plates and cutting the cake. I laughed as my childhood friend told an embarrassing story about me. For a moment, it almost felt normal again, like the confrontation with Karen was just a strange glitch. But as I moved from one group to another, hugging old buddies, I spotted Karen lurking at a distance, typing furiously on her phone. My gut told me she was stirring up more trouble. Sure enough, Beth sidled up to me, her phone in hand. "She's posting on the neighborhood forum," Beth muttered, eyes scanning her screen. "Listen to this. We have a chaotic group in the park, complete disregard for HOA guidelines, some ex-soldier thinking he can do what he pleases. I'm appalled." I exhaled slowly. "So now I'm an ex-soldier? Just wait. Soon she'll say I'm an invader." Beth touched my arm. "She's not going to stop, James. She loves control." Despite my training in patience and resilience, I felt a flicker of anger. Let her talk. The truth is on our side. By the end of that day, the reunion wrapped up. My parents and I headed home, and I spent the evening catching up with family in our cozy living room. Laughter mixed with tears as we flipped through photo albums from my childhood. I felt a comforting warmth settle over me. If Karen was the worst obstacle, I figured I could handle that. But around 9 p.m., just as I was about to turn in, a knock at the door startled me. My father opened it to find a police officer, different from the ones earlier, standing on the porch. "Evening," the officer said. "We got a report about a disturbance and possible trespassing at this address." My dad blinked. "Disturbance? We're just watching TV." I stepped forward. "Is this about our party in the park today?" The officer nodded, looking a bit embarrassed. "Yes, sir. We received a tip that some dangerous individuals were staying here. Something about an ex-soldier potentially causing trouble." I pressed my lips together, rage simmering. "That's me. I'm the dangerous ex-soldier who just came home from deployment." The officer scanned my face, then sighed. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I can see there's nothing going on. Could you just confirm your identity, sir?" I provided my ID and discharge paperwork, which we still had lying on the kitchen table. The officer gave a quick glance, nodded, and apologized. "We'll note this as a false report. Good night." As he drove off, I could practically see steam coming out of my mom's ears. "She's terrorizing us, calling the cops again?" Beth clenched her fists. "Karen must be bored with her life. I can't believe she's doubling down." My father looked at me with sad eyes. "Son, I'm sorry. I wanted your return to be peaceful." I mustered a tight smile. "Dad, it's not your fault. Karen's the one with an issue." Over the next few days, I tried to settle in. I visited old friends, applied for a local job. Meanwhile, Karen's antics escalated. First, we found a note taped to our door with HOA violation, in bold letters claiming we had an unapproved lawn ornament, my father's patriotic yard decoration that had stood for years. Then we got an email from the HOA about noise complaints at suspicious hours, which made no sense because we were all asleep by 10 p.m. A neighbor, Miss Danvers, stopped me on the sidewalk. She was a kindly older lady who'd known me since I was a teen. "James," she whispered, "Karen's telling everyone you're unstable from your deployments, that we should be afraid of you. I don't believe it, but some folks are gullible." I grit my teeth. "Thanks for letting me know." A couple of days after the second police visit, I decided to take my parents and sister out for a peaceful stroll through our old downtown. We wandered past the bakery that once sold my favorite apple fritters, the movie theater where I'd seen my first Western, and the diner where my dad treated me to root beer floats when I was 10. For a short moment, everything felt normal again, as if Karen's harassment was just a bad dream. But normal didn't last long. Halfway down Main Street, we turned a corner, only to find Karen herself, standing outside a fancy boutique. She spotted us immediately, her mouth curving into a cold, knowing smile. I tensed up, warning my family under my breath, "Keep walking. Let's not give her any reason." Sure enough, Karen marched straight over, cutting us off on the sidewalk. "Oh, look who's out and about," she said loudly. "You think you can bully this entire neighborhood and then parade around town?" My mom gave a startled gasp. "Bully? We haven't done anything to you, Karen." Karen raised her phone in one hand as though filming us. "Stay back!" she yelled suddenly, her voice echoing off the brick walls. Passers-by paused, drawn by her dramatic outcry. Before I could blink, Karen staggered backward, clutching her shoulder like she'd been struck. "He's attacking me!" she shrieked, pointing at me with a trembling finger. "Someone call the police! This Marine is out of control!" My father's jaw dropped in outrage. "That's a complete lie!" A small crowd formed, all eyes flipping between Karen, who was spinning a wild story about my so-called assault, and me, standing there in shock. I slowly raised my hands, palms open, so everyone could see I wasn't touching her. My sister tried to argue with Karen, but Karen just wailed louder, staggering in circles, gasping that she felt unsafe. A local shop owner stepped outside, eyes narrowed at Karen. "I've got security cameras," he said firmly. "You sure you want to accuse him of something he didn't do?" Karen's face paled, flicking her gaze from me to the camera mounted above the boutique's window. She let out a nasty huff, then stumbled away, phone still raised, muttering about gathering more evidence for the HOA. People on the street shook their heads in confusion, some clearly recognizing that Karen's performance was over the top. As we hurried on, my mom's hands trembled against my arm. "She's going to twist this too," she whispered. I nodded, heart pounding. Karen had just proven how far she'd go to frame me as a threat, right in front of half the downtown. And now it was only a matter of time before she turned this stage fiasco into more fuel for her bogus charges. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail, summoning me to an official HOA hearing. The letter, full of legalistic language, alleged that I'd been disturbing the peace, damaging property, and harassing neighbors. My father almost crumpled the paper in anger, but I stopped him. "Let's do this the right way," I said, trying to quell my own fury. "We'll gather evidence and show up with the truth." Beth spent hours collecting photos from the reunion, testimonies from neighbors who saw Karen's meltdown, and proof that the police found no wrongdoing. My dad typed up a statement clarifying we'd lived here for decades, never had an issue until Karen singled us out. We were ready. The hearing took place in the HOA's stuffy little office. A panel of 5 people sat at a long table, with Karen at one end, wearing an expression of smug satisfaction. She was still the HOA president, after all. The board chair, a middle-aged man named Mr. Price, gave me a polite nod as I entered. I could see a few neighbors in the small audience, including Miss Danvers, arms folded, glaring at Karen. Karen rose to speak first, flipping through pages of notes. "We have reason to believe that James Carter has repeatedly violated HOA rules. He held an unapproved gathering, threatened me, and continues to disrupt the peaceful nature of our community. Additionally, there are concerns about his mental stability, given his military background." A wave of outrage hit me, but I forced my face to remain neutral. She was playing dirty, implying my service had left me unstable. When it was my turn, I cleared my throat. "With all due respect, Miss Karen is twisting the truth. I returned from deployment to be with my family. They organized a short gathering at the public park, which the city maintains. The police arrived and found no violations. We have photos and statements to prove the event was peaceful." Beth handed out copies of those photos. Smiling faces, a Marine homecoming banner, not a single piece of evidence of violence or damage. The board members flipped through them with interest. My father stood up next. "We've lived here for 30 years. Not once did we get a complaint until Karen started targeting our family. This is harassment, plain and simple." Karen tried to interject, but the board chair quieted her. Then Miss Danvers, bless her heart, spoke from the audience. She explained how Karen had spread rumors about me, stirring fear without any basis. Another neighbor chimed in, confirming that Karen frequently harassed people with petty rules, but she'd gone too far targeting a Marine veteran. I could see Karen's confidence waver. The board members looked unimpressed by her flimsy claims. Mr. Price cleared his throat. "Miss Karen, do you have any actual proof that Mr. Carter committed wrongdoing?" Karen sputtered. "He was wearing combat boots in the park. That's threatening. And I have pictures of him. Of him scowling." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. Even the board's own lawyer seemed to hide a smirk. My father shook his head. I stayed silent, letting Karen bury herself in her own ridiculousness. Just as it seemed the hearing was winding down, a uniformed police officer burst into the room. He spoke quietly with Mr. Price, who then looked at Karen with wide eyes. "Miss Karen, could you step forward, please?" Karen, puzzled, approached the officer. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Karen, I have a warrant for your arrest. We have evidence that you filed multiple false police reports and possibly tampered with official HOA documents to push these complaints." The entire room gasped. My jaw nearly hit the floor. Karen turned pale. "That's impossible! I'm the HOA president." The officer calmly took her wrists. "Ma'am, you forged certain signatures on documents claiming property damage and faked evidence of noise violations. We traced it all back to your computer logs and phone calls. Filing false reports is a crime." Karen's eyes darted wildly. "No, this is a misunderstanding. I was just trying to keep the community safe." Beth exchanged a stunned glance with me. The policeman escorted Karen away, ignoring her protests. My father let out a breath, shaking his head in disbelief. The board members looked shell-shocked. Mr. Price cleared his throat, trying to regain composure. Well, in light of these developments, it seems Miss Karen has acted outside the rules. James Carter, the board finds no evidence to support her claims. You're free to continue living here without any sanctions. Applause broke out among the neighbors in the audience. By the time I stepped outside, I saw Karen being placed into a squad car, her face twisted in horror. She yelled something about how this was a mistake, that she was protecting the neighborhood, but no one seemed to believe her. A small crowd had gathered, some neighbors whispering to each other, others snapping photos. The officer closed the car door and drove away. That evening, we gathered around the kitchen table eating a simple meal of roast chicken and mashed potatoes, my mom's specialty. Laughter bubbled up between mouthfuls as we recounted the day's events, still trying to believe that Karen's false accusations had led to her own downfall. Dad raised a glass of sweet tea. To James, for standing up for what's right both overseas and right here at home. I whispered a silent thanks for my safe return, for my family's unwavering support, and for the neighbors who saw through Karen's lies. In that quiet moment, I finally felt at ease. If I could survive war zones, I could survive one entitled HOA president. And in the end, she was the one who had to face the consequences of her actions, with handcuffs on. Thank you for sticking with me through this intense story. If you found Karen's downfall satisfying, please like, subscribe, and share your city in the comments below, because in the end, we can only hope that every Karen out there faces the justice they deserve, and that good folks like us can finally find the peace we fight for.